Justice for Ganapati. Ganapati was brutally beaten up by a rubber hose after being in police custody for 12 days. Police brutality is a serious issue. If it can happen to them, it can happen to any one of us. Remember these names: Kugan Anandan, 2009; Sugunar Chaladuri, 2013; Karuna Niti, 2013; Dharmendran Naryathami, 2013; Balamurugan Supriya, 2017; and this year, Ganapati. Indians are overly represented in custodial deaths, even though they may be found guilty. However, they deserve to be treated humanely. If it can happen to them, it can happen to any one of us. Push for accountability, push for transparency, push for integrity, push for IPCMC, push for justice.
Filed a police report saying that my article is trying to incite people to go against the monarchy. So some questions are asked regarding the article. So I exercise my right to remain silent. So I will only answer in court if I get charged. But basically it's about the article. That person who lodged the report against me is questioning the fact that I write an article critiquing the institution and also the politics of Malaysia. This person his name is Muhammad Nazar. If I'm not mistaken, he's a student. He's been tagging me on Facebook. He's also running a campaign with the hashtag #ThinkIrFadia. So that's the police report lodged in Gangwani actually. And there are a few other police reports lodged against me by Perkasa. I don't have any information.
Human rights usually talks about freedom, safety, and basic rights. They are the ground rule for how we should treat one another with dignity, respect, equality, and fairness.
The pupils of the Orang Asli, the Orang Ulu and the Anak Negeri groups together constitute the indigenous population of Malaysia. As 2017, the indigenous pupils of Malaysia represents approximately 13.8% of the total 31.6 million national population of Malaysia. In 2007, Malaysia adopts the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Aboriginal Peoples Act 1954 also provides the protection, well-being and advancement of the Aboriginal peoples of Peninsular Malaysia. Although Malaysia has adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples since 2007 and the Aboriginal Peoples Act 1954, but the indigenous peoples in Malaysia still facing a number of challenges until now, especially in terms of land rights. In Selangor, a proposal to remove official protection from a forest reserve in Selangor State was met with protests by indigenous communities who feared their homes and livelihoods will be affected. While in Pahang, state protested plans for the development of 3 rare earth mines. And in Kelantan, the Ninggiri Hydroelectric Dam construction project has been met with protests from the local Orang Asli. The indigenous peoples of Peninsular Malaysia are known as Orang Asli. There is a clear lack of reference to the customary agrarian rights of Orang Asli in Peninsular Malaysia. Maps used by local government also do not include land occupied by orang asli that is not gazetted as orang asli reserve, making them effectively invisible in Malaysia. In Sabah and Sarawak, the laws introduced by the British during their colonial regime that recognized customary land rights and the customary law of indigenous peoples remain in force. However, they are not implemented properly and are ignored by the government, which prioritizes the extraction of large-scale resources and the plantations of private companies and state agencies on the rights and interests of indigenous communities. When indigenous communities in Sabah complain about others on their land, they have been told that their application was rejected, although application of another individual or company was accepted before theirs. While in Sarawak, the provisional leases by government authorities have been given to third parties, all forest reserves have been gazetted, overruling land that was the subject of native applications. We must remember that the indigenous people in Malaysia are not against modernization, but they just want their home and right to be protected. What can the government do is expedite the gazettement of land to permanently protect the indigenous people's home and re-examining government policies that allow logging and mining license. And what we as a Malaysian can do, we can stay update on the issue the indigenous peoples are facing and keep fighting for their rights.
Of expression is essential to ensure democracy and the free exchange of ideas that allow society to thrive. Article 10 of the Federal Constitution of Malaysia provides for the right to freedom of speech and expression for all citizens. Although the country has long repressed freedom of expression, Malaysia's regime was believed in some ways beginning to relax prior to the formation of the new coalition government in March last year. But since the creation of the new coalition in March 2020, it appears that the country has continued the trend of increased oppression. For example, Tashini Sugumaran was interrogated by the police recently after reporting on migrants being arrested to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The government viewed an article as exposing it and informing the public in a way that could shine a negative light on the government. On May 2020, a businessman was charged under the Communication and Multimedia Act and the Penal Code for condemning the government's prosecution of citizens who had violated movement restrictions put in place due to COVID-19. Section 233 on CMA has also been used to conduct investigations and arrests against those suspected of spreading fake news. To date, the Malaysian Communication and Multimedia Commission (MCMC) has opened as many as 262 investigation papers in connection with the dissemination of fake news on COVID-19, with 29 individuals charged in court. As important as combating misinformation during a pandemic is, limitation to freedom of expression must be necessary and proportionate for the protection of public health and must be only conducted under a clear accessible law. Section 233 of CMA falls short of these requirements. As long as this repression continues, it raises the question in community, why, if Malaysia is so-called reforming country, does it practice such extreme thought censorship? Despite Malaysia's constitutional safeguard, it is obvious that the country's excessive law to restrict freedom of expression is a violation of that right. These laws should be examined and modified in order to bring them into compliance with international human rights norms and Malaysia's own constitution, as well as to avoid the violation of the rights to freedom of speech in Malaysia without consequence. However, the situation in Malaysia believed to be better.
Ganapati is a Kalmit trader who was arrested on February 24 to assist the police investigation on his brother who was wanted by the police. However, on March 8, his family member was informed that Ganapati was released but was in the intensive care unit ICU. He suffered many serious injuries on his leg and shoulder and was believed to be beat by a rubber hose during his custody. His condition was reported normal when he was arrested, instead of his history with diabetes and heart problem. After a month in the ward, Ganapati was declared dead. His autopsy report confirmed that his death was due to the leg and shoulder injuries. However, the police department had denied the allegation of the police abuse because they claimed there are not enough evidence for the abusement. This has outraged the public reaction as the police seem to cover their fault and good name at this point. Next is Sivabalam Subramaniam. Security guard Sivabalam Subramaniam died in police custody at Gombak District Police Headquarters on 20 May 2021. The deceased was taken in to assist an investigation at 11:45 in the morning. The report then said that Sivabalam has confirmed that at 12:25 p.m. after an hour of his custody. However, his family member claimed that the police had called them to tell about his brother who is in critical condition at 3 p.m. and asked them to send someone to look after him in hospital Selayang. The information that the family member got was not in line with the report issued by the police, and it questioned them about their brother's condition while in the police custody.